Our scripture for today comes from Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord guards the city, the guard keeps watch in vain. It is in vain that you rise up early and go to bed late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives sleep to his beloved. Sons are indeed a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the sons of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies at the gate. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So all through this month of July, we've been working our way through a series on rest. We talked about rest being the first holy thing created by God, set apart not as a reward, but as an essential part of what it means to be human. And that our worth as people does not come from what we can do or what we can make or what we can achieve, but that we are gifted by God with the ability to rest, to pause, to breathe, to savor, and to enjoy times when we are not struggling, when we are not working or toiling, and that we don't need to feel guilty about taking a little time away in order to refresh, to renew, and to be in the presence of God. We talked about what it means to try to take some mental rest, to be able to focus our minds and to step away from that monkey mind that tends to grab a hold of our attention in those moments where we try to be still, and that we have a God who is gracious and merciful and forgiving and is ready to give us a chance to start over, even when we find ourselves wandering off in times of quiet prayer. Last week, we used a psalm to help focus our time. That was a psalm that was written by David in the midst of some turmoil that he was going through. Today, again, we're in the book of Psalms, but this time, this psalm has a different author. This psalm is written by Solomon. If you remember, last fall, we spent a week looking at Solomon. This is a painting of that famous story about Solomon wanting to cut the baby in half because the women are arguing about who the baby belongs to. Solomon is remembered as a man of great and profound wisdom. In fact, that's the thing that he asks God for. When God comes to Solomon and says, "Ask what I should give you," Solomon does not ask for the life of his enemies. He does not ask for fabulous riches. Instead, what he asks is to be a man of wisdom. And he's remembered by the people of Israel, not just for that wisdom, but also for being the one who builds the temple, the one who built a house for God. So when we find ourselves reading a psalm that is written by Solomon that talks about building a house, it's probably worth paying a little attention to. This is Solomon, the wise one, the great builder. And when he talks about building a house, there's sort of a double meaning here. On one hand, he is talking about a house with like walls and a roof and windows and a door. But there's also a sense that he's talking about building what we might call a legacy. Building something that's going to outlast you. If we've got any Game of Thrones fans, you've heard of like House Baratheon or something, right? There's a lineage here. There's something that goes on beyond us. If any of you have ever said, "Look, I want to leave a legacy behind me. I want to teach my kids or my grandkids, my nieces or nephews, I want to teach the next generation how to live lives that are meaningful or impactful. I want to teach them how to love God and to teach others to do the same thing." then all of this should ring a bell for you, because this is what Solomon is talking about. When he says, unless the Lord builds a house, those who do the building labor in vain. There's a deep humility in saying that. There's a deep humility in recognizing that when it comes to the things in this life that matter most, very few of them are things that are actually within our control, within our ability to manipulate. Solomon is remembered as a person with fantastic wealth, incredible wisdom, with literal insight given to him from God. And when he says, look, even I can't make this all work, I need God, that should be a sign, well, I don't know about to you, but it's a sign to me that I'm probably not that bright and I'm going to need to let God do some things too. The example that always comes to mind when I think about what it means to trust God and still to work and to be faithful. I think about the people in the very first community that Robin and I moved into after we were married. We moved into Harrison County, Indiana, which is on the very southern part of Indiana. It's an agricultural county. The farmers we met there were some of the hardest working people I've ever met. Self-driven, motivated, willing to put in whatever it took in order to get seeds in the ground, to get the harvest back out of the field. And yet every single one of them would tell you that it did not matter how hard they worked, they could not make the sun shine. No amount of getting up early or staying up late could make the rain fall when you needed it to fall. For the things that matter most in our lives, we are fully dependent on God. We're fully dependent on God to give us the things that we could never work out on our own, could never engineer for ourselves, could never manipulate creation to work towards our benefit. And every time we try, we set ourselves up for failure. Solomon talks about this as the bread of anxious toil, which is a great poetic image, right? I don't think that he means that when we work too much, when we try to control things that are beyond our control, that we actually are making a loaf of bread. But instead, I think that this bread of anxious toil might be something like those relationships that start to decay as we spend time checking our email. I think it looks like those opportunities that we let pass by so that we can spend a little bit more time at work, so that we can tend to a couple more things, so that we can stay just a little bit later, so that we can do just one more thing. How many times do we spike our blood pressure? How many times do we let our relationships start to wither? How many times do we turn to things to cope that drain our bank accounts, that compromise our health, or that spiral into addictions? Because it's easier to do those things than to admit that we don't actually have all that much under control. For Solomon, his advice is that the way that we come to grips with not being able to control everything is that we take time to rest. And that may seem counterintuitive, because I don't know about you, but my instinct when I see that things are starting to feel a little bit out of control is to push down on the accelerator just a little bit harder, to do a couple more things, to work a little bit longer or harder in order to try to get things back under control. But Solomon says that the answer is not in the gas pedal, but in the brakes, in the pausing, in the resting, in the building of rhythms where we have seasons where we strive and we have seasons where we step back, where we call time out, where we take time to breathe and to pause and to reflect. The people of Israel had these pauses baked into their life together. Every 7 days was a day of Sabbath, a day of rest. You don't work. Nobody in your house works. You don't make your animals work. Everybody pauses. And then every 7 years, you take the whole year to rest. I want to talk about something countercultural. The idea of taking every 7th day completely off is hard for a lot of us. The idea of every 7 years just resting, letting the fields rest, letting things recuperate, rejuvenate. It's almost too much to think about. But here's the thing that happens during a Sabbath. You find out how much the world keeps on spinning even without your effort. You find out how much all of those things that are important, those things that really matter in your life, that those are still there. And in fact, sometimes they're actually strengthened because you've stepped away. A lot of people don't discover the gift and beauty of rest until it's forced upon them, usually by some sort of medical diagnosis. By some doctor saying, no, you're not going anywhere for a week. No, you're not going to work that many hours. No, you're not going out into the yard. No, you're going to pause. You're going to give your body a chance to rest and to reflect. We had a chance as a culture a couple of years ago to hit pause. How many of us were told, stay home, don't go out unless you need to? Don't take extra trips, don't be at the grocery store more than you need to, stay home. And we discovered in those weeks or months that there was actually a little more time than we realized, maybe. That there was time to go for walks, that there was time to play board games, or to actually cook a meal instead of just pop it in the microwave. That somehow, even when we slowed down, God was still present. And maybe we were even a little bit more aware of it. So friends, my invitation to you is to accept the gift of rest and of rhythm, of a season where you strive and a season where you step back and watch what God can do while you rest. It's amazingly humbling, but it's also amazingly freeing. Because you find out that the one who knows how many hairs are on your head, the one who knows every word that's going to cross your lips before that it even gets there, that one actually knows enough to provide for you, to give you your daily bread, and to renew and restore you for whatever the next chapter is that God will bring your way. So let's pray. God, your rest comes to us as a gift. Forgive us for those times when we've tried to take the work that belongs to you and make it our own. Open our hearts and our hands to receive your rest and your peace, so that what we do in this life would be pleasing and acceptable to you.